the next episode of New Gay Plus. I know you've been eagerly hear from us, in particular about this fantastic new movie that's come out called Promare. So today it's going to be me, Mitz.
Myself, Justin, otherwise known as Tangleworm.
And I'm Kerina.
And we are back again, reunited as a squad. So this time we're actually all recording in the same room, and kind of just as a background with Promare, we watched it in separate cities at different times, and each of us really liked it.
I believe Mitz and myself have watched the sub twice in different editions.
I watched the dub version.
Yes.
I've only seen it once.
And Kerina has seen the dub.
Okay, so just kind of some housekeeping. There's going to be spoilers in this podcast, so
we are
please
going to discuss the whole plot.
Yeah, don't listen to this if you're like, what's Promare? But if you do want to hear about some really queer stuff, then welcome aboard. Okay, I guess I really wanted to talk about Promare because literally after I got out of the theater, I was just my mind was reeling. There were so many moments that were so good.
I've been feeling pretty burned out with animation recently, and I think that Into the Spider-Verse and then Promare reignited I was like, oh, animation is good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So on the note, I guess we should start off with things that we really enjoyed about the film and things that stuck out to us.
Yes. And also, if anybody's just listening for the first time, something that we are trying to do with our podcast is the point of New Gay Plus is not to just dunk on stuff and just be like, oh, I hated that. Or, so kind of what we like to think about is if we had a chance to give it another go, what would we change about it? But to start that off, let's talk about what we really liked. Like you were saying, Kerina. Would anyone like to go first?
Yeah. Oh man, it's just the feeling coming out of the theater. We watched it the first time with a group of our friends, and we were all really on the edge of our seats for the whole time. I think the film, as a work of animation and as a work of film, is a masterpiece of visuals and just the pacing and the character design and just the visual language that they're using. It's really bombastic. It really everything about the visuals and the way that it's directed supports the energy that the film is trying to achieve. And I think that's it's a really cool thing and a really great achievement how they managed to do that.
I remember thinking that it felt like the stitched together cutscenes of a lesser known PS2 game, but in a good way.
Yeah. I've heard people critique it for having a really difficult pace to follow because watching it just sort of doesn't give you a breath to be and it moves along really quickly. But I kind of like that as well.
I'm glad that it was a movie. I've watched a couple of Triggers shows, and I feel like Little Witch Academia and Kill la Kill both kind of. I feel like they could use half of the episodes that they have, and I really it was a good amount of time to spend in that world, in the world of Promare. I was like, this is just enough to leave me wanting more. Whereas I feel like if I had 24 or so episodes, that's more chances for them to miss.
Yeah, definitely. There's definitely the sense of because there is this time restraint, that restraint has bred a kind of faster than, I don't know how to say, but the restraint of the time of the movie meant that the pace had to be fast and that they had to be very good with their establishment and then the callbacks later on that happen. So it kind of tied everything together that way.
Yeah, it was efficient. Every plot point that I was like, oh, are they going to bring that back? I was like, oh yeah, you remember this guy, right? Yeah. Which I thought was really cool.
They had plenty of time for their 12 different climaxes.
Yeah.
Yes, there were many of those.
Oh my goodness. I think on the second watch through, something that I appreciated, because the first one is sort of you just getting a big picture of what's happening. The second time, and I don't know if this was the case when you watched it, but I got a lot more. I could hear a lot more of the sound cues. So the theme by Kakusei for Leo, you could hear the piano music playing when he is stuck in that volcano, and then also when he's at crying dragon going through the city. there's this like really cool just like instrumental of it playing that just is like, oh my god, that's Kakuse, that's Leo, and like they really like milked the shit out of that cue. And then same with Inferno, which is like Gallows theme. I forget which part it was, but there's like a part where it's just playing on piano. And like the first time I watched the movie, I didn't really pick up on those cues, but the second time I was like, oh, this is like a Gallows scene. Like, oh my god, like
that's a good leitmotif.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely. Like the music reinforced the story, and the story reinforced the music in a way that was really mutualistic, and it was really cool. And on top of that, like, I think just the way that the world was designed is really cool. Like the city definitely feels very New Yorky, which is I think where they were going for. And just the visual storytelling of like the opening shot with like rows and rows of fire hydrants right after the opening scene where like the Great World Blaze happens. It kind of establishes like, oh, the world has moved on, but it's also still really wary about fire and things that are happening. And one thing that really called out to me too about the visual design was the use of shapes in the way that they're establishing the characters. The way that I read it, the intro scene with the triangles representing the burnish mutation happening for the first time, and then later on with the opening scene of what happens 30 years after the Great World Blaze, is the first shot we see is squares and the buildings that have those squares on top of them. Like everything is very square in the, I guess, like society. So the way that it read out to me was that triangles represented people that were outside of this new society, like the Burnish, Mad Burnish as a group, and like fire powers and
like instability too, because like the triangle like as a shape and as a triangle as a shape really like indicates that there's not one point that is like the strongest, but like and very symbolic of the fire, right, is like that ever changing like tipping the balance and tipping the scales. Whereas like the square, we were like, oh, the square is like stability, it's like for boring people, and so like it's like, and it's like the sort of like the bulky shape as well, like and like even with like, it was crazy because like even with like the lens flares, you could see like the square lens flare when it was like talking about during a scene for like a specific character, right?
The squares representing like hegemonic society, or like this is the not natural, but like this is the way that society has been constructed in this new age, is to follow these squares. Even down to like both Burning Rescue and Freeze Force, their ice bullets are also little cubes, like even down to those tiny details. And halfway through the film, the first glimpse that we have of like a circle motif is when they get to the underground lab underneath the frozen lake. Everything is circles, and later on I think that motif comes through in the circles being like, they represent technology in that it can be used for both good and evil. Like Deus Promet's lab has been lying there. He's the inventor of the anti-burnish technology, or like the fireproof technology that a lot of people use today. When they spin the burnish in the energy cells, they turn into circles.
Right.
The core of the Deus Ex Machina in its head is like an orb that was both the cockpit as well as like a prison for Leo at some point, but then they repurpose it to be a cockpit again. It's kind of saying that like, no matter what technology is developed, it's up to how you use it, whether it's for good or for evil. So I thought that was like a cool metaphor for the storytelling.
Correct me if I'm wrong, the fire is always triangular,
yes,
and then water is square as well.
Yeah,
like when you like liquid. I mean, obviously the ice cubes are squares.
Yeah, I remember the streams like from the fire hydrants. They were also in like little square-shaped particles, which is a cool touch.
Yeah. And also, speaking of like having that shape symbolism, like it makes for like really efficient like visual storytelling, because you don't have to be like, and look, it's like Burning Rescue, you just gotta show like a vaguely cube shaped thing, and it kind of comes up, and like I think that sort of struck a note with me when you were talking about how like the shapes overlap in certain instances, like how when they start up that portal, from like, I want to call it the Ark, but like
the Parnassus.
The Parnassus. How like when it projects into the sky, it's made of triangles that are being forced into like a square, into a rectangular shape, which is like the burnish being used to create this portal. And then similarly in the engine, how like that little like sort of pyramid shape that Harris is in,
the middle,
square shape that's made out of triangles. So it's sort of like carries and continues on that visual metaphor. That's like, that's really cool.
Like the energy of the people that live outside of society are being confined to this thing that has been built by somebody who is at the very top of structured society. And it's cool that the square shape is used for both Burning Rescue, which is a heroic group, and Freeze Force, which is like a villainous group. I think what they're trying to say with that, or the message that I got from that, was that like the way society is structured right now can help provide like services to people or like some kind of organization that can help people, but it also could represent something that really oppresses people or like had some kind of organized power that is able to take freedom away from people as well. Like there's the ups and downs of that.
On that note, should we talk about the readings of this movie? Because I think there's a lot of... So I went to a panel recently at a convention and got to have some folks that worked on Promare talk to us about it. And it was fascinating for a number of reasons, because I think that a lot of people have very specific... Like it's really easy to draw parallels between this movie. I think one of the reasons why Promare is so like has captured the hearts and minds of so many people, especially like young people, is because of the like very, very clear lines you can draw between the movie and like what's happening in life right now.
Yeah.
So like it's not even a stretch. This is not like our like deep leftist reading of Promare. It's like super obvious, right? Like okay, so the Freeze Force that shoot out guns that shoot ice. What could that possibly represent?
I don't know.
And of course, their goal is to like subjugate and imprison an underclass of people, a marginalized group. Whose only real crime is something that is beyond their control.
Yeah.
There's the Cray Foresight, this movie, the best names in all of anime. I thought that Gundam had the best names, and it turns out that Promare has the best names.
Gundam's been dethroned.
So Cray Foresight, of course, is this this billionaire industrial. He's like the mayor or something. He has some like position.
He's the mayor.
He's
like an inventor. He does it all.
He wears many hats, but the hat that he wears most proudly is that of billionaire capitalist, who has seen a dying world, who's seen a world that is overpopulated, does not have enough resources to sustain its population, and of course his goal, or his idea, as many real life billionaires' ideas, is to gather up a small group of like-minded and like wealthy individuals and just like bounce and just like say fuck everything, fuck everyone who cannot afford to get on this ark, the Parnassus. He's created this magical spaceship that will take them somewhere else, and the planet is just fucked. It's just gonna get ruined.
And also they're going to do that at the cost of like many people's lives.
Yes, exactly.
And also even that, like, in the movie, like, Gallo asks Cray, or like tells Cray, like, well, why don't we just fix the core of the earth? And then Cray's like, nope, can't do that. Like,
nope.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Because he's like, it's too. Oh, I don't. So I saw this once, and I saw it a little while ago, so I could be getting some details mixed up. But yeah, I feel like it's like, oh, we can't, like, it's impossible. It's impossible to fix that problem. But at the same time, you see the money, the like physical structures that have been built in the name of this like dumb arc idea. And it's like, it brings to mind, like, there are so many people saying so many things are impossible, while also pouring resources into things that like continue to make stuff where I feel like I'm dancing around. I feel like I'm not saying stuff that
like pouring resources into just like their frame of view is so limited that they don't see that if they were to try as hard to do what they deemed was impossible, they might make some headway.
Yes. Like it is framed by Cray Foresight as like there's no other way. We have no choice but to kill all these Burnish to power the engine of our spaceship to get off this doomed planet. And it's just like there is like why not spend all of that money, all of that time, all of those resources to try and save this planet instead?
Yeah. And there was also the point of, I think it was Gallo who says later on in the movie to Kraid, like, you just want to migrate no matter what. Like, he's coming up with post hoc justifications for a choice that he already made without all of this evidence.
Right, like you're working backwards. Like, you already know you want to get the spaceship.
Like, what can I do that will...
Listen,
like...
we gotta put space in this movie somehow, and I'm gonna be the one. Like,
yeah.
And also, I think like it's pretty key that that Gallo is a firefighter. I mean, not just in reference to like the natural enemy of the person who creates fires is the firefighter. But just like the thinking, considering firefighters in popular media, like that, like for example, when I was in a women's studies class, we were discussing like the difference between like police and firefighters as like in terms of like fantasy, because it was a women in sexuality class. So the fantasy per se of like cops was like, there was actually a lot of people in our class who were like, there's not really a fantasy there. But firefighters sort of exude this sense of like safety, like they're like the modern day knights kind of, like that's sort of the energy that they have, is that they're genuinely interested in like people's well-being. Whereas like with police, that's not necessarily the case. Like for a lot of people, they're like, police are protective in society, but for a lot of people they are a force that like threatens and uses their power to like subjugate others, which is I think key in the sense that they made Gallo a firefighter and not a police officer.
Yeah, absolutely. Like a police, like in maybe in a better world than the one that we live in, like both police officers and firefighters are the like platonic ideal is that they are like public servants, right? Their job is to create safety, like ensure the safety of the public that they serve. We know that is not the case in the world that we live in. But yeah, I think just in terms of like firefighters don't like fight people. They fight fires.
They do fight people in this movie, but
they do fight people in this. They do nothing but fight people. Actually.
But they like the platonic ideal, like you were saying.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Also, Gallo, fireman's calendar. like firefighter's calendar. Like,
it is his right to be shirtless as a hot person.
You know, he doesn't get naked just for fun. So,
but I would even go further and say that like the critical difference between like firefighters and like police officers is that I think in an ideal world where like people are given enough social security and or like have enough support from society that they don't turn to like say violent crime or like theft and other kind of stuff, you would not necessarily need police officers. Like it would have much more like empathetic like social work or like other forms of maintaining like a non-violence or like protection in society. Whereas firefighters are people that will be needed even in an ideal world. Like if something goes wrong, there will need to be some sort of emergency services to like help people get out of dire situations. Like it's not founded on like cracking down on things or like dealing with things, and especially on like in the modern day form, like you could see stories of like the exercise of police power having disastrous consequences, and like it's no longer like increasingly, as you're saying, like how it speaks to a modern audience or like a very young audience. Like the perception of police among youth is definitely not that of like heroic crime fighters, but like we see more and more stories of police abusing their authority and all that kind of stuff.
So I mean, there's a lot that we liked about the film. I do want to like, so coming away from like sort of the overarching themes of the story, I also really enjoyed the climax of the movie, in my opinion. Is
there one specific aspect?
Now that you mention it, there was one part that made like one part of the film that absolutely had me going cuckoo bananas, as the kids say, is the kiss scene. And I have to say that like that was a really cool scene for me, because first of all, I came into the movie like my friend did not tell us what was going to happen, but I was just seeing a lot of gay fan art about it.
Oh yeah.
So I was just like, I think like I was like, okay, I just thought it was just like shipping stuff, right?
But like, because we are so used to that being what we get, right? Like you have the character design of Gallo and the character design of Leo, and I think that what we are so accustomed to is like nothing is going to happen in the movie everything that we want is going to happen.
It's just going to be subtext.
It's going to be fan art. It's going to be fics and stuff.
Yeah. So, and okay, also as sort of a segue, I did see somebody post on Twitter that they brought their friend to Promare, and their friend was like super excited because they're just like, I managed to avoid all the spoilers except for one. All I know is that Gallo works at Hooters. Like generally I had avoided spoilers because I was like, okay, there's something about a firefighter, something about this green haired dude. And so in the scene where like Leo is dying and a Gallo like performs CPR on him and then eventually kisses him. I just like we were watching this in one of like in a smaller theater in our hometown, and like the theater just went nuts. Like people were applauding. There was this part where somebody where like as the scene was ending, someone just yelled out, "Kiss longer!" It was.
I saw it in a packed theater, and yeah, the response was riotous. And then the next night, I was at a Super Smash Brothers Melee tournament, and I heard somebody like across the room talking about watching Promare the previous night at the same place that I was, and he was talking, and he was like, "Oh yeah, everyone was cheering for the kiss scene," and I like piped up, and I saw him, and I was like, "Yo, Promare," and then he was like, "Yeah," and he was like, "Oh, everyone was so wild about that sex scene, or the sex scene, about the kiss scene," and I was like, "We gotta take what we can get," and he was nice. He was like, "That's fair."
Yeah, but that was the thing, is like I was not expecting it to even get there. Is like just and even afterward, like when I was outside, I was like, "What are they gay?" Like it was like my brain was just like sort of it was like almost like gaslighting me and being like, you know, just because two guys kiss doesn't mean that they're queer.
Well, they had an that was the most impressive thing for me, is they had an opportunity to like ungay it. Yeah. Because Gallo kisses Leo. And that is absolutely what it is. We can say that it's part of CPR, but we all know what it is. And then his reaction afterward, you know, he jumps backward, he recoils, like, and he does the, like, I was waiting for him to be like, "Oh, I can't believe I just did that." Like we've all seen that before.
And it's always been the gay panic scene.
Yeah, and he does that, but it's not for the reason of, "I can't believe I just kissed a guy."
Yeah, he says like, "I can't believe as a firefighter you made me light a fire for the first time."
That's right, because of the act of performing CPR, like he's breathing life into, he's like what's the word, stoking like Leo's like inner flame, right? Yeah, and he is very, Gallo is a simple man. he loves pizza. He hates fires with all his heart, and he will never light a fire. You better hope his pilot light doesn't go out in his apartment ever. So his reaction is like, "Oh no, I can't believe I," and I'm like, "Don't say it," and he's like, "Lit a fire," and it's like, that's amazing. Yeah, that's amazing.
What a great moment for just like feeling safe.
Yeah, you know? Exactly. And you know, that's so interesting too, because like that moment of like, because I was expecting them to turn it around. I was expecting there to be like sort of an like no homo thing at the end of the film. But like that moment suddenly like recontextualized the film for me, because I was suddenly like seeing, like I was like, okay, if these two characters are queer, then we got something in common. And I was like, oh my god, like now this film's about me. Like I suddenly like how it felt is that I was just like, it was like a moment in the screen like looking down on me and being like, "I see you." And that was really cool. And like that how he dealt with it after, not just shying away from like, "Hey, I kissed a dude and I liked it," kind of thing. Like it also suddenly it reminded me of like when I would go to like panels at VanCaf, and they like, which is a Vancouver comic arts festival in Vancouver. And like people would be like, "Can't we just have comics about like queer people who are like pirates and like queer people who are like astronauts, and instead of having stories that are just like the crux of the story is like, there's a character who's queer, how are they going to deal with being queer? Like, can't we just have like stories that are just like queer characters doing like cool stuff, right?" And suddenly in that film, like when they have that pause and Gallo's just like, like kissed Leo, I was like, oh my god, it's just queer firefighters and queer gang leaders, and it was I was met.
Yeah, there's a part earlier in the movie too where Gallo's like, "This is my frozen lake where I always go to clear my head," or whatever. and there's like what could have easily been a romantic scene between him and Ina, and they're like stepping on the ice or something, and Ina like trips or slips.
He catches her, and it looks like he's about to kiss her, but he's really just looking at Leo.
Yeah,
in
but
the sky.
Yeah, exactly. It was fantastic. It was so funny.
Yeah.
So I was kind of primed for it. I had like heard, I knew what was up about this movie, so I was already like reading it with that lens in mind. So I thought that was, again, I don't know how intentional that is. Like I can't speak for the filmmakers, but I thought it was very, very funny that in like the climax of just a classic like hetero romance scene.
Yeah.
Gallo's like, shut up, Ina, I have to look at this book.
Actually, when he was like holding Ina, I like looked over at Justin and I just whispered like, Gallo is bi. And then when he drops her, I was like, Gallo is gay.
That's how you can tell.
That's
the drop test.
Exactly. That's right.
Also, shout out to Gallo for having a healthy coping mechanism. Like, instead of getting angry at any person, he's just like, I'm going to go to this lake where I know it's a good space for me to calm down.
Yeah.
True.
Also a great moment to demonstrate his exactly what kind of person he is, because he's like, I dug down 5 meters into this ice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's like, he's such a safe character. Like, as in like, I really liked that he was such a masculine character, but also like very much like a healthy, like, he's like, when I get upset, I go to this lake and chill out. Like, I'm gonna listen. I'm coming from like a protective mindset when I'm like dealing with people. Like, I'm interested in like looking after other people instead of like pressing them down so that I'm above them, you know?
Yeah.
And like he sort of comes at the Burnish with a like open mind, a fairly open. It gets wider as the movie progresses. Like,
well, his whole. I mean, he doesn't like when you start fires, and so he has like he has beef with the Burnish because of the like hegemonic structures in place that have taught him what Burnish are. Like he has an idea in his head that is then challenged by the events of the movie. But I think that it's a nice little arc for him that he is able to. I mean, it's real simple stuff, right? It's like guy thinks he knows what's up, and it turns out he doesn't know what's up. But I think that like when I think of the other examples of that, it's all like Dances with Wolves or like Avatar or something like that. You know, where it's like an indigenous population. It's like, wow,
it's a very like
indigenous people are people too. Whereas this has a much more contemporary, I guess in those sorts of stories, it almost feels like the like marginalized group does not really have a voice of their own, or like their job is to like guide
and then to be saved.
Yeah. Is to like teach Gallo and then step back, because now it's the like the protagonist's time. Yeah. And I didn't feel that from Promare. I think they do a pretty good job of like, it is Gallo and Leo coming together that allows them to succeed in the end. It was
very poignantly like Leo's flame that protected Gallo, and also in the end, like all of life on Earth in the final scene, which is really cool. There was that part where like Gallo commits a microaggression when he's like, "Do Burnish eat food?" And Leo's like, "What the hell, man? Like, right?
Of course,
food,
right?" And he was so very clearly. Oh, also okay, like tying back to the kiss scene, like that. Like going back to the earlier scene where Gallo is like, "Do you eat food?" He's talking to Leo, and he's just like, "Can't you just stop burning? Like, isn't that just an option for you?" And like it was very like I very much heard it in the sense of like as a bi person, it's sort of like, well, you're dating a guy, so that means you're not bi anymore, right? Like, and it's just like, well, can't you just like turn off that part of your personality or the part of your identity that's marginalized, or that's like that's going to be othered, you know? And then you just fit in with the rest of us. And when Leo is like, we don't have a choice, like, I think it's really meaningful for me to hear from Leo that like he sticks up for the fact that he's like, I'm Burnish, like I don't have to make an excuse for being Burnish.
Yeah.
Which going back to the kiss scene, like, I think it's significant when Gallo kisses him, because when I was hearing that first line about, like, just stop burning, I was just hearing the, like, just don't be queer.
Yeah.
But when he kisses him, I'm like, haha! It was just kind of like a cool, like, oh, this is a series where, like, the main character is queer, is, like, reflecting back on me, like, what I want to see, and like, the possibility that I could be a hero. Like, it just felt really good.
We should talk about the ending then, like the ending after the kiss. What happens after the kiss?
Yeah,
right.
And also to the, like, what could have been improved about the movie.
Yeah, the New Gay Plus part of our podcast. You know, for all of, like, Promare's good parts to it, I do have to say the ending sort of left me feeling a little bit weird. And I think Tangleworm, like, you touched on a lot of this, or Justin Tangleworm, you touched on a lot of this when we were outside of the theater, and talking about, like, the resolution is sort of like, well, now you're not Burnish anymore, so we don't have to have any issues. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I think like it all stems from the foundation that, like, the Burnish as a metaphor for any number of oppressed groups. Like, a lot of people could read being Burnish as, like, being queer, or being Burnish as, like, being an immigrant, for example, an example of, like, the pizza guy.
Right. Yeah.
And that kind of stuff. Like, it seems like a very, like, wide reaching metaphor.
It's like X-Men, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And similar to X-Men in the premise, like, it breaks from reality in that the Burnish actually can be dangerous to non-marginalized people, which is generally not the case in real life. Like, we're all human in real life. So when they use the metaphor of the Burnish as, like, this is the stand-in for the marginalized group, but also in the intro of the movie, we can actually see that Burnish outbreaks have caused a lot of people to die. And it's like, it's called the Great World Blaze, and, like, there's a lot of death and destruction. It doesn't map one-to-one, and I don't think the movie ever quite gets away from that or with it, you know? So the ending of there are no more Promare and no more Burnish in the world, I feel like they're trying to eat their cake and have it too, in that, like, being Burnish is the metaphor for being a marginalized group. But to solve that, all you got to do is get it all out of your system, like, burn really hard, really just once.
Get that gay shit out of your system.
And then you can just be normal like the rest of us. You know, it's a very assimilationist kind of ending to the narrative.
Yeah.
And also, like, you were talking about when Deus Prometh, the professor, the doctor who was working with Cray Forsyth, like, he, like, had developed the anti-burnish technology, and Justin was just like, well, there's already existing technology to, like, to create infrastructure to support people who are Burnish. So I think it might have been a cooler ending if the Promare had stayed, and that, like, society could have just been built around, like, okay, now that we know that there's people who are Burnish, how can we support them? So that we can coexist as a society.
If we run with the metaphor that, like, these are people in society who do feel the need to release fire every now and then, what would have happened if we replaced the resources that went into, like, lining the streets with fire hydrants and, like, all that kind of stuff, and created, like, more fireproof buildings, or, like, fireproof districts that people can live in a city, or, like, safe places for people to release flame, you know?
Or even, like if we're going to channel that flame, like, let's turn that flame into energy or whatever. But it doesn't have to be at the expense of people, like being chained up into a cube and spun around, like, and, like, from my perspective, like, considering what I do for work, I'm, like, so interested in the what kind of education could have been offered to people prior to them, like,
because it was what 30 years. How long after the first
30 years?
Because that's, like, enough time that's like a generation, basically.
That's a whole
right?
generation.
Yeah, like, you could be like, I would not have been alive when the first Burnish happened. Like, I would have grown up in a post Burnish environment, right?
Yeah, and that's, like, time to be like, okay, well, can we start studying the signs of when people might be Burnish, or like when if it's something that people can't control, like, what are situations like anger management, or, like, increasing, like, just decreasing the amount of scenarios where somebody would just like explode, someone would just burst.
Yeah.
The one thing that I'll say to like the end, like they burn up real hot, and then they no longer have like the connection to the Promare, right? I still think that like I can imagine like people are bigots for people are not like bigoted for like logical reasons, and so I can conceive of a world where it's like I don't like that person over there because they're Burnish. It, like just easily translates to I don't like that person over there because they used to be Burnish. Like I feel like you don't necessarily stop being Burnish just because you no longer have this connection to
the Promare.
Like I can conceive of a world where like Burnish identity goes beyond like the actual literal ability to shoot fire out of your hands, but Burnish identity is like a cultural like the like what am I saying? Like people that grew up Burnish understand what that was like, even if they can no longer shoot fire out of their hands. So I feel like I wouldn't say that it's like the end of the Burnish, but it is like they have been like made safe.
Yeah. It's in like
they've been like declawed in a weird way.
which is a like I feel like there's such a missed opportunity there because like Leo, Guerra, and Mace, like just in the span of the movie, you get to see what kind of tech they produce with their Promare, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like couldn't we have made like a better world with like if people could use could direct the Promare to create things, like it was just like it was sort of like 3D printing at your hands, like and I feel like that would have been a cooler ending, is to see how people like learn to live together, as opposed to like being like, well, now you're like me. But again, like, you know, I Kerina, what you were saying about even though like the Promare is gone, it's not necessarily over. It kind of reminds me of if I can have a little personal segue into the chill. One time when I was in high school, one of my friends got into a fight, and I remember got into a fight in front of me, and like got like super, like it was like a pretty intense like fisticuff kind of fight. And I remember afterwards I was telling my friend, and I was just like, she was telling me like, you know, I think that what your friend did was like he got into that fight at that moment because like he knew that if he didn't, it was gonna just happen later on. And like I guess like I sort of see that in the metaphor here is that like just because you don't necessarily mean it, just because you don't necessarily see it, doesn't mean that it's not going to happen. It's just going to be delayed. So just as a viewer, just because we didn't see the, like, there wasn't any, like, oh, well, now that the Burnish are not Burnish anymore, we're going to start fighting them and beating them up and shit, like, that's going to happen. Like,
and I think that, like, maybe one of the weaknesses of the Burnish as a metaphor for otherness is that there is, like, reasonable justification to be wary of someone who can spontaneously shoot fire, as opposed to like marginalized groups are people hate and fear marginalized groups for a reason that it is not because they have superpowers. So I think that's like, by making it like, I think you're giving like the public who are like anti-Burnish kind of a convenient out, where it's like, well, I don't want my house to get burned down. Like, that's fair.
That's fair. Like, you got a reason there.
Whereas, you know, the immigrants, for example, like are not, they do not wield the power that that Burnish possess.
It is like talking about like the real life discussion surrounding it. Like a lot of the fear mongering around immigrants is really interesting, because you would imagine, based on some of the headlines you read, that like immigrants actually can burn people's houses down with their eyes or something. Like, but really, like it is a strange middle zone where like immigrants are simultaneously portrayed as like they're gonna steal your jobs, they're gonna outcompete you, versus they're so lazy and they don't do anything, or like they're here and they're gonna like replace everything, or like, oh, they're here and they refuse to integrate, and like you know, there is no winning, and there's no reasoning people out of an opinion that they did not reason themselves into. Like if the thing is based entirely on fear, there's always going to be another reason why they're going to remain entrenched in their position. You know, it's not something you can, in my experience, it's not something that you can logic them out of. And the movie itself, like, kind of doesn't really touch on that. There's the one scene there's the one scene where the pizza guy, like the same people that had been enjoying the pizza that the pizza guy made were like, this was made by a burnish, how disgusting.
Now I don't like it.
I don't like it, which is just like, wow, it's kind of the movie saying that, like, it's irrational to be afraid of burnish because the pizza guy just wanted to make good pizza, right? But the movie also says that, like, the way that this whole society is built with fire hydrants on every corner and, like, burning rescue as a group and ice guns and stuff is just the rational way to structure society after the entire world burned on fire 30 years ago. And, like, those two things are kind of at odds with each other because of the limitedness of the burnish as a metaphor.
Yeah.
So, but, I mean, yeah, exactly. Like, great movie. And again, that's stuff that, like, I think we were, like, the thing about, like, watching a film is, like, I think especially a film that suddenly it was like, and now there's a queer element to the film. Like, it made my brain, like, my brain was, like, literally on fire. Like, it was just like,
it was literally on fire?
It was literally, like, Promare style. Because I was just, like, suddenly I was, like, finding myself being, like, extra critical of it because I was like, okay, I have literally been burned before. So that ending was really, like, making me, like, think, like, can we carry on the metaphor? Like, is it actually gonna work? And yeah, unfortunately, I don't think it did in that sense. But yeah, I mean, overall, it was a good film.
It was a really enjoyable film.
Yeah.
I wanted to mention. So I went to this panel, and there were a couple people that worked on the film there. And one of like, Trigger has a diverse body of work. They've done some more wholesome stuff like Little Witch Academia, and I would consider Promare to be on the more wholesome side of things. I think that they've also done stuff like
Kill a
Kill, like the Cutie Honey reboot. Was that Trigger? Or was
I think that was Gynax.
It was folks who would go on to do stuff at Trigger. I think by and large, it has
Gurren
that like
Lagann, with the drill stuff in the movie, like,
and even Evangelion further back. There's a whole lineage there.
And yeah, so so one of the questions that somebody brought up, I'm trying to remember what the specific question was. It was something about like they wanted their answer was that they wanted Promare to be like a like more accessible, like all ages kind of show. Whoa. And then they kind of the two people who were there who worked on the movie, the producer and the character designer, they kind of like joke to each other about like all of our like dirty jokes are like we've been saving them. They've been like they were joking again. They're like they're like overflowing inside me. Like our next project is gonna be like, oof, like just you wait.
Oh my god,
it's gonna be like just raunchy because of we've had to hold back so much. Promare was basically like their stance. And I know it was like an offhanded remark at a panel, and as a joke, like it was clear, like people were laughing and they were laughing with each other.
Yeah.
But it also kind of like called into like, it was almost like do you really? Because it's easy to watch Promare and be like, wow, these people genuinely care about stuff like global warming and immigration and like the rights of the marginalized. But was this just them like trying not to say anything dirty, and then like are they just gonna go right back to like like Upskirt Mex the movie to
right? They also did Darling in the Franxx, and there's a whole
Darling in the Franxx was
them, I think.
Or I think the character designer on Promare was also did mech designs for Darling in the Franxx. Yeah, I mean, I guess it just like it wasn't so much that like it wasn't like I don't believe it was. It made me like believe in the project a little bit less. Like, was this just some kind of like freak accident that they stumbled their way into the most like progressive movie of 2019.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of no. That's exactly it. Is like when the movie ended, I was just like, well, was that like even though Gallo had dealt with that kiss scene as being like, oh, you lit a fire, and like part of me was just like, was that just like accidentally gay? And they just like,
Right.
like, and like part of me is even just like, I sort of feel the same way I did when oh, spoilers for Legend of Korra, but when in Legend of Korra, when the very last scene of that is Korra and Asami looking at each other like over like a spirit portal, and it's very like much framed in a way that's like they're dating. And I remember when I saw that, my mind was just like, okay, you know what? Don't get your hopes up too high, because maybe it was just a meaningful look between friends. And then when I actually like, and then one of the creators like actually went out and said like, no, they are in a relationship, like, and I think he was saying that like they couldn't show like a kiss scene or like a very like a affectionate display of their relationship, but they were like, so we wanted just enough for you to know like something's happening, and now I'm going to confirm it with you that was what happened. Whereas with Promare, I don't think I necessarily get that. Like, even though the scene is technically a more explicit moment of affection, it's still like I almost feel like any day now it could be like, yeah, I mean it happened, but it was just a, it was just an accident. I don't know, like it doesn't really mean anything, kind of thing. Like if someone went around and said that, I would be disappointed but not surprised.
Yeah. There's a definitely it's a very real fear of that. Like the state of the safety it's kind of in a limbo right now. It's balancing on the edge. And I really don't want to be disappointed, but I feel like it is easy to be disappointed, like based on stuff.
I mean, in a way, it doesn't matter either, right? Like,
that's true.
Like, regardless of the intent of the people who made it, the project is out in the open now.
That is true.
The death of the artist.
That's right. It's important to like understand the context that the author created the work in, but also like, the fan community has taken Promare now.
Gallo and Leo.
Gallo and Leo belong to the fans.
They are already married.
That's
They're about to move in together. They're gonna adopt a dog and some children.
And children.
Gallo started working part-time at Hooters, apparently.
Oh, dang.
This is the truth.
There's like this comic that somebody did I think that sums it up nicely as it's like a picture of Gallo and Leo, and then it's like the audience, and they look at Gallo and Leo, and they're just like, gay? Question mark? And then the message that Gallo and Leo are sending that goes right over the audience head is like, the rise of fascism during climate change. And like that. That's like, because there's exactly, like so much in the movie that's like applicable to this time. And then it sort of is almost like if you like when you look at it as a whole, there's some very like strong messaging about like, I guess, what needs to be done in our time or what's happening in our time. But also if you zoom in too close on one side, you could also just be like, it's a thing about a firefighter and there's some crazy action and mechs. Like if somebody were to describe the movie that way, I don't think they would be wrong either.
That was the last thing that I wanted to mention at the panel, was that one of the people who was able to get up and like ask a question in front of them. I got up, but I was too far in the back of the line. I didn't get to ask. No, but someone did, and they were just basically like, "Hey, I'm a Latino person. Like your movie like really struck a chord with me, and like it moved me, and like thank you." And it was really nice.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's what you do it for. You would hope. So I think that's probably all our bits about Promare.
I mean, we could keep just like gushing for the next hour or two.
It was a thoroughly enjoyable and enjoyed film.
Yes, yeah. So, I guess I'll wrap it up. We're gonna piece it just like the Promare did in the film,
right.
And let you have a great little time on your own now. I want to say like this might come out around Christmas holiday time, so just as a little message from all of us is to take care of yourself during the holiday. Do what you need to do to conserve your energy and to give yourself a good holiday time.
Spend time with family or don't spend time with family.
Yes.
Yeah.
Whatever you need to do.
Whichever one is the best for you.
And keep it queer.
That's right.
Yeah.